Okay, I'm going to show you how to slip and score your pieces together. Now this example is 2 slabs, but this really goes for any type of shape or form that you want to put together. So let's say I want to put this wall up to stand up with this wall like this. So I would need to slip and score this edge and this edge. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to score it. Now scoring is when you're making marks into the clay. So I could use this needle tool to do that. I could also use one of these wooden tools if these are out, and that can also kind of make my marks. But I'm making my marks going both directions in the clay. I'm going diagonally both directions. I really want to mark up that clay. And remember that when you're slipping and scoring, what you're doing is rather than just doing 2 flat ends together and trying to join those, which they'll stick together when they're wet, but once they dry, they will fall apart most likely. With scoring, you're helping interlock that clay so that when the moisture dries, it stays interlocked. So the scoring part is actually very important. Okay, so now I'm going to score my other piece that I'm connecting it to. Basically just making a bunch of X's in the clay. Okay, now I'm going to slip. So I have containers of slip. This clay might have sunk down to the bottom, which is what happened with this one. But you really want like this muddy consistency. And you can't be scared to dig in there. I know it's nasty, but I promise you there's no monsters or anything down there that's going to bite you. So just stick your finger in there. Don't be afraid. And you want to just get a good coating of slip on there. Careful not to smooth out the score marks that you just made. So I'm not rubbing it. I'm just kind of blotting it on there. And then I'm going to put it again on my other surface. Just kind of dabbing that on. Okay, now I am ready to put them together. Kind of wiggle it on there. And then I'm going to use, I just like to use my finger that already has slip on it to start smoothing out the cracks. We do not want any cracks in our finished product. So slip actually works really well to help with that, to help fill in little crevices. Now another thing I could do is, I have some really wet clay here. And I don't need much, but I can put it into a coil. I'm just going to coil it within my hands. And I really want like a nice thin coil. And you can use this to stick in any crack as well. Again, you don't want much clay because you don't want it to become like a real big and bulky part. But then you can stick that into that crack there. And then you can use either your finger or you can use this wooden tool and kind of help smooth it out and get those to stay fused together. So this is really nice if you're building a box type shape, if you want to be able to reinforce those cracks, especially if your slabs are on the thinner side. Okay, so now I have quite a few imperfections, so I can take my wet sponge and just start to really smooth that stuff out. Careful to hold it with my opposite hand. And then I see some crevices that are missing they just need a little bit of clay. So again, I can just use some of that slip and stick it in some of those. And then another thing is I have these loop tools that you can use if you have, let's say, some bumps on your clay, which we really want our clay to be nice and flat and smooth on all sides. So let's say I want to shave off some of this top here because it's really bumpy and not exactly the flat edge that I wanted. I can use this loop tool to carefully shave off some of that clay. Now you want to make sure your clay is leather hard when you do this, because see, you can do what I just did there and over carve really easily. Like I am putting a very, very light amount of pressure on this loop tool, because if I put too much, it just digs in and it grabs way more clay than I want. So again, make sure your clay is pretty leather hard when you do that. If it's cutting too much off, that means it's probably too soft and you just need to wait until the next day. But it works really well. Like I've got a corner right here. Let's say I want to even this out. I can use this to help me do that. Okay, and then one other thing is, now that I have all these extra little peels from that, I can just throw those in my slip cup, because these are great pieces where they're not going to really build much up if I add them to my bag of clay, but they're great to just combine for my slip. So I've got a few crumbs, and I can even also take, like if you have a bunch of little crumbs on your board, just take some soft clay, just kind of dab them up. That moisture will pick up your little crumbs and your little pieces. And then you can just put that in the slip cup. So once you start putting things together, slipping and scoring, getting things built, you can use these turntables, which work really nicely to keep your project on, so you can turn it around as you're working on it and see all sides. So these are in my clay cabinet. You're welcome to use, I've got plastic ones. I also have metal ones. Just beware, the metal ones come apart. So when you pick them up from the top, the bottom will fall and it makes a really terrible, nasty noise. So, like that. So when you pick them up, just pick them up from the bottom, please. And then one other thing that you'll want to make sure you do is put a paper towel down, because otherwise sometimes your project will get stuck to it and then it will mess it up trying to peel it off. So just make sure you have a paper towel down between your project and the turntable so you don't have that problem.